Yesterday you woke up believing the world was testing you again. Another challenge, another repetition of the same story. But what if the world isn't against you at all? What if everything around you is quietly reflecting the exact state of your own consciousness? Every argument, every silence, every coincidence, a perfect echo of what lives inside. The truth is unsettling. Reality doesn't react to what you want. It reveals what you are. And once you begin to see that, every moment becomes a message from the mirror itself, waiting for you to finally look, not at the world, but at yourself. Have you ever noticed how certain themes keep replaying in your life, like a film you thought you'd finished watching, only to find it looping again frame by frame? You leave one relationship because it feels suffocating, and months later, a new one forms with the same undertone of control. You switch careers to escape the same frustration, and somehow it reappears under a new title. It's easy to call it bad luck or fate, but there's something subtler and more intimate happening beneath those repetitions. Reality, in its quiet intelligence, isn't random. It's precise. It reflects you back to yourself with an accuracy that can be uncomfortable when you're not ready to see. That argument you had this morning wasn't just a coincidence of bad timing, it was a mirror, showing you the tone you unconsciously hold inside. The delay, the rejection, the praise, the loss, all of it belongs to a language that reality speaks fluently. And the secret is, it's speaking to you, about you. When something happens to you, it's tempting to separate yourself from the event. But look closer, there's a resonance between your inner state and the external scene. Life, like a tuning fork, vibrates in response to your dominant frequency. You don't attract situations by wanting them, you attract them by being them. The repetition of patterns is simply the universe replaying a message you didn't fully receive the first time. You might ask, so what exactly is reality trying to tell me? It's trying to make the invisible visible, to reveal the emotional blueprints you live by, the ones too ingrained to notice directly. That chronic feeling of being unseen might not be proof that people ignore you. It might be the echo of a subtle belief that your presence doesn't matter. Life reflects that belief with exact fidelity until you notice the pattern not as punishment, but as communication. This is the turning point where many either awaken or harden, because when the reflection becomes uncomfortable, the ego rushes to assign blame to the boss, the partner, the economy, the universe. But reality doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It keeps showing the same reflection until the observer changes. It's like standing in front of a mirror with a frown, demanding the image to smile first. The mirror will wait, endlessly patient, for you to realize that movement begins on your side of the glass. Here's the quiet paradox. The more you resist what reality shows, the stronger the message becomes. Life raises its voice only when you ignore its whisper. Those moments of discomfort, the repeating conflicts, the cycles of scarcity, the déjà vu of frustration, they're not proof that you're cursed or broken. They're signals guiding you back to coherence. Imagine reality as a translator between your subconscious and the visible world. Every experience, every person you meet, every event you label random is a translation of your internal vocabulary. You speak with emotion. Reality responds with circumstance. If your inner language is fear, the translation will sound like chaos. If your inner tone is trust, the translation becomes synchronicity. Most people try to decode this language intellectually, asking, why is this happening to me? But the question isn't about why, it's about what. What in you is being mirrored? What emotion, belief, or unintegrated truth is playing on repeat? The moment you stop reacting and start observing, the pattern begins to loosen. Observation dissolves repetition because awareness itself is transformative. You can't stay unconscious to what you've truly seen. Try this. Recall a situation that keeps returning, maybe a recurring conflict or a familiar disappointment. Close your eyes and strip away the external story. What's the feeling tone underneath it? Is it resentment, inadequacy, the need to be right, the fear of being abandoned? Don't analyze, just name it softly, without judgment. That feeling is the real protagonist of your repeating story. The world outside is simply the stage. This is how reality communicates, through repetition, contrast, and resonance. It mirrors not your wishes, but your energetic signature. When the same emotion keeps echoing through different faces, locations, and timelines, it's not the world mocking you. It's your consciousness calling you home. And here lies the deeper mystery. The mirror doesn't care about appearances or affirmations. It responds to your state. You can say, "I am abundant," but if your body hums with the frequency of lack, life will keep showing you shortage. It's not cruelty, it's coherence. The universe mirrors vibration, not vocabulary. So the next time reality repeats itself, pause before reacting. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening again?" ask, "What aspect of me is this scene revealing?" That single shift, from resistance to curiosity, changes the conversation completely. The world stops being your opponent and becomes your interpreter. And when that happens, something extraordinary begins. The illusion that life is out there starts to fade. What was once an external drama becomes an intimate dialogue, a feedback loop between your consciousness and its reflection, preparing you quietly for the unsettling realization that the mirror itself might not be where you think it is. You've probably heard it said 1,000 times. You create your own reality. It's the modern gospel of positive thinking, the golden key that promises transformation if you can just imagine hard enough, visualize vividly enough, affirm persistently enough. Yet, beneath all that effort, many discover a quiet contradiction. No matter how intensely they imagine, some parts of their life refuse to change. The same financial pressure returns, the same emotional patterns persist, the same relationship dynamics recycle under new names. The vision board glows with ideal images, but reality seems unmoved, as if it's politely waiting for something deeper than imagination. This is where the illusion begins. Imagination is powerful, yes, but not in the way most believe. It's not a brush that paints reality directly onto the canvas of the world. It's a mirror reflecting what already lives inside you. When imagination is used to escape what's unresolved, it becomes fantasy, not creation. You can decorate the mirror with affirmations and bright colors, but the reflection won't shift until you do. Think of it this way. Imagination is like a projector, but the film it casts is made of your inner state, your unspoken beliefs, your emotional patterns, your self-concept. The picture may change temporarily if you manipulate the light, but the real underneath remains the same. That's why people can spend years visualizing abundance and still live in quiet scarcity. They imagine wealth on top of an unexamined identity of lack. The mind says, "I am free," but the body still trembles with old tension. Reality doesn't listen to words, it listens to vibration. There's a subtle tyranny in the way imagination is often used, the pressure to force reality to comply with one's desires. You picture the perfect outcome, repeat mantras, hold a smile in your voice, but underneath a silent fear whispers, "What if it doesn't work?" That whisper is the actual command the universe receives, because imagination doesn't override your being, it amplifies it. If you visualize from fear, you strengthen fear. If you imagine from doubt, you engrave doubt into form. It's not that imagination is weak, it's that it can't outwit coherence. The universe is coherent to your core frequency, not to your surface thoughts. So when imagination becomes a mask, it ends up reinforcing the very pattern it's meant to erase. It's like trying to calm a trembling reflection by smoothing the glass. The tension isn't in the mirror, it's in the one being mirrored. Try a simple test. Think of something you've been trying to manifest. Maybe a relationship, a sense of peace, or a breakthrough in your work. Now, instead of imagining it as something out there to attain, sense how your body responds when you picture it. Does it relax or tighten? Does the thought of having it feel natural, or does it trigger the subtle ache of not having it? That tiny somatic clue reveals the true message you're sending to the field of reality. The mirror listens to that, not to the polished mental image. There's another layer to the illusion, the belief that imagination alone creates experience, when in truth it reveals the architecture of your current state. Every image that surfaces in your mind is shaped by what you unconsciously hold as possible or permissible. If you secretly believe you're unworthy of love, your imagination will show you scenarios of rejection even while you consciously affirm otherwise. The mind's pictures are diagnostic, not definitive. They show where you stand, not necessarily where you're going. This realization can feel humbling, even disappointing, because it dissolves the fantasy of control. But within that humility lies real power, the power to align, not impose. Creation begins not with mental projection, but with energetic coherence. You don't make reality happen, you allow it to organize itself around your inner truth. The imagination then becomes a translator of your alignment, not the engineer of your escape. When imagination works against awareness, it breeds frustration. When it works with awareness, it becomes revelation. To use imagination wisely is not to paint over pain, but to illuminate it, to see the mismatch between what you imagine and what you embody, and to bring the two into resonance. When you imagine peace and your body resists, don't force the image harder. Listen to the resistance. That's where the real alchemy happens. You might notice too that the mind's favorite form of self-deception is optimism without integration. It believes that envisioning light can erase shadow, that dreaming of joy can bypass grief. But light doesn't erase darkness. It reveals what's hidden within it. Imagination without self-honesty becomes another way of avoiding the mirror. You can dream endlessly of a better future and still be trapped in the unobserved present. So instead of asking, "Why isn't my imagination working?" you might ask, "From what state is my imagination arising?" When the source is aligned, calm, sincere, undefended, imagination becomes magnetic. It no longer tries to pull reality closer. It allows reality to unfold as an extension of your clarity. And here's where the illusion begins to fracture. The moment you stop using imagination to manipulate reality, it starts reflecting truth instead of projection. You stop being the dreamer chasing the image and begin to sense the presence that's always been behind both dream and mirror. What happens next is subtle. Your attention shifts from the image in the mirror to the light that makes the reflection possible at all. And that light doesn't come from the world outside, it comes from the consciousness that sees. That's where the real power has been hiding all along, waiting patiently for you to stop imagining long enough to truly watch. There's a moment in every inner journey when the comforting theories stop working. The affirmations fade, the rituals lose their shine, and you're left standing in front of something raw and merciless, your own reflection. Not the polished version you show the world, but the one that reveals the exact tone of your consciousness, without disguise or delay. This is the moment when the mirror principle stops being poetic and starts being surgical. The truth is brutal in its simplicity. The universe doesn't show you what you want. It shows you what you are. Every situation, every encounter, every silence is a projection screen for the vibration you're currently radiating. When you feel unseen, the mirror doesn't confirm your invisibility, it amplifies your belief in it. When you feel betrayed, life arranges scenes that echo that internal fracture. Reality is obedient to frequency, not desire. The discomfort comes from misunderstanding the mirror's function. Most people think reality is supposed to reward effort or punish failure, but the mirror doesn't have opinions, it only reflects. You can smile at it or curse at it. The reflection won't shift until the original expression changes. So when you rail against the world for being unfair, you're essentially arguing with your own reflection, mistaking feedback for opposition. The mirror's neutrality is its precision. It will not lie for your comfort, nor soften its edges to protect your ego. It shows you the truth of your inner tone, the sharpness in your voice, the impatience in your timing, the fear disguised as control. If you look closely enough, you'll notice that every pattern that irritates you in others carries a faint trace of your own energy. You might see selfishness and feel superior, yet secretly fear your own needs. You might condemn manipulation, yet still play small to gain approval. The mirror reflects both sides, the shadow and the light, not to judge but to unify. To grasp this, you have to release the fantasy that the outer world is an independent force acting upon you. What you call the world is a multidimensional reflection of the unseen content within you. That doesn't mean you're to blame for everything that happens. That's a misunderstanding rooted in guilt. It means that nothing appears in your reality that doesn't correspond in some way to your state of consciousness. The mirror doesn't accuse, it informs. Think of reality as a perfectly calibrated feedback mechanism. When you're centered in clarity, events flow. When you drift into fear, friction arises, not as punishment, but as a signal, a vibrational nudge inviting coherence. The pain isn't proof of failure, it's the instrument tuning itself back to harmony. The trouble begins when you try to silence the instrument instead of listening to it. Imagine standing before an actual mirror, noticing a smudge on your face. You wouldn't lean forward and start cleaning the glass. You'd touch your own skin, not the reflection. Yet in daily life, that's what most people do. They try to polish the mirror, manipulating circumstances, fixing others, rearranging appearances, instead of cleansing the inner cores. They spend lifetimes polishing reflections while their own energy remains unattended. And here's the hardest truth. The mirror never lies, but it does wait. It waits for you to stop performing, stop pretending, stop reciting what you think you should believe. It waits for the moment when your inner posture aligns with honesty. Only then does the reflection soften. The world bends not to your will, but to your authenticity. You might notice how often people try to bypass this law through emotional negotiation, by being good, positive, spiritual. But the mirror doesn't reward appearances. It only resonates with the actual signal. You can say, "I forgive," while your body still tightens with resentment. You can affirm, "I'm safe," while your breath remains shallow and guarded. The mirror listens to the vibration underneath the words and responds with perfect fidelity. It takes courage to live with that awareness, because once you know the mirror reflects your state, you lose the luxury of victimhood. You can no longer hide behind the narrative of bad luck or unfairness. But that loss of illusion is the beginning of real freedom. Responsibility is not blame, it's the capacity to respond consciously. When you realize the mirror obeys vibration, not effort, you stop trying to control outcomes and begin tuning your frequency. You can test this in small ways. Pay attention to how people react to your presence, not their words but their energy. If the world feels defensive around you, look at your own guardedness. If chaos follows you, feel for the restlessness you've been ignoring. The outer pattern will always trace back to an inner rhythm. Once you change the rhythm, the dance of reality shifts on its own. This is why spiritual growth isn't about becoming more positive, it's about becoming more accurate. The mirror principle doesn't demand perfection, it demands coherence. When your inner signal matches your truth, even pain reflects clarity. The reflection becomes luminous, not because life suddenly turns easy, but because you've stopped confusing the mirror for the enemy. And if you stay long enough with that clarity, if you watch the mirror without flinching, a deeper realization begins to emerge. You start to sense that the reflection and the observer are not truly separate. The mirror isn't just showing your state, it is your state. The line between inside and outside begins to blur, and then, without warning, the question arises, if the mirror only ever shows what you are, where exactly does the mirror end and you begin? There's a split second, so brief it almost escapes notice, between what happens outside you and the wave that rises inside. Someone cuts you off in traffic, a friend forgets to call, a co-worker questions your competence. The body tightens, the mind flares, words sharpen. You think you're responding to them, but in truth you're reacting to your own reflection. That's the first invisible error, mistaking the mirror for the source. Most people live in constant argument with their reflections. They shout at the glass, demanding it change first. When life reflects anger, they get angrier. When it reflects fear, they tighten control. Every reaction strengthens the pattern it's meant to erase. The mirror doesn't punish, it repeats. It multiplies whatever energy you feed it, not out of malice, but through the law of coherence. Reality synchronizes with your state, so when you react unconsciously, you unconsciously instruct life to keep looping the same scene. You can observe this in your smallest habits. The irritation that flares when someone disagrees with you, the rush of defensiveness when a partner mirrors your insecurity, the sudden silence when criticism touches something you've tried to bury. The mirror speaks, but we mishear it. We think it's attacking when it's only revealing where we still hide from ourselves. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror, noticing a smudge on your reflection's face. If you forget how mirrors work, you'll reach toward the glass, scrubbing furiously, leaving fingerprints everywhere. That's exactly what happens when you react to reality instead of observing it. You interfere with the reflection, never realizing the mark is on your own skin. Each reaction becomes another layer of distortion. The reason reaction is so magnetic, so automatic, is that it feels righteous. Anger feels justified, fear feels protective, blame feels like control. But none of them actually change the reflection. They only confirm it. When you meet aggression with aggression, you tell the mirror, "This is still me." When you resist rejection, you announce, "I am still identified with being unloved." And the mirror, obedient and neutral, says, "As you wish." The subtle art here isn't suppression, it's awareness without engagement. The moment a reaction arises, it carries data, emotional information about the state of your inner landscape. The body tightens not to signal attack, but to draw your attention to a frequency mismatch. If you rush to react, you miss the message. But if you pause, even for a single conscious breath, the reaction transforms into reflection. That pause is where the alchemy begins. Between stimulus and response lies the only real freedom a human being has, the choice to observe rather than amplify. Observation doesn't mean passivity, it means presence. It's the difference between being inside the storm and watching the storm's pattern from above. When you can watch your irritation without fusing with it, you stop feeding the mirror new material. The energy starts to dissolve because it's no longer being rehearsed. This is not easy. The nervous system is conditioned to protect identity at all costs. The ego reads the mirror's reflection as threat because it reveals inconsistencies between who you believe you are and what you actually vibrate. That's why emotional triggers feel so personal. They threaten the false image. But if you can stay still inside the discomfort, you'll sense that the reaction isn't you, it's a messenger. The mirror is showing the gap between your story and your state. Try noticing just once today the first moment of heat when you're misunderstood. Instead of correcting the other person, feel the contraction in your chest or the pressure in your throat. Don't fix it. Observe it. The body will reveal what the mind denies. Beneath the story of offense, there's always something quieter, an old memory, an unmet need, a part of you waiting to be seen by you. The world is merely the stage where that part gets mirrored into visibility. Each time you refrain from reacting, you change the instruction you send to reality. Silence becomes signal. The mirror, detecting no resistance, starts to reflect stillness back. What once looked like conflict begins to reorganize itself. People soften, situations de-escalate, not because you manipulated them, but because you stopped projecting turbulence into the field. The reflection obeys coherence, but reaction is clever. It wears new disguises as you grow. It might appear as righteous truth, spiritual correction, or setting boundaries, when underneath it's still the same compulsion to fix the mirror instead of the image. The deeper the awareness, the subtler the temptation. The mirror tests sincerity, not performance. You'll know you're escaping the loop when outer events stop feeling personal. The driver cutting you off, the colleague undermining your work, they lose their symbolic weight. You begin to see them as neutral reflections of universal dynamics, not personal insults. The tension in your body lessens. The mirror reflects that peace by ceasing to provoke. And slowly, something fundamental shifts. Instead of reacting to reflections, you begin to read them. Reality turns from adversary to language. Every echo becomes an invitation, every repetition a coordinate on your inner map. You start to sense that the reflection itself isn't fixed outside of you at all, that perhaps the glass you're yelling at is made of something closer, something interior. And that recognition, that the mirror you've been fighting might not be out there in the world, prepares the ground for the next revelation. What if the mirror never existed apart from your own perception in the first place? It begins so innocently. The urge to make things go right. You adjust, plan, calculate, anticipate. You tighten your grip on schedules, people, outcomes. It looks like responsibility. It sounds like competence, and for a while it even feels safe. But beneath the surface, the need for control is not mastery. It's fear wearing sophistication. It's the mind's attempt to command the reflection instead of tuning the source. Control is the second invisible error because it operates under the illusion of logic. If life is a mirror, then surely you can rearrange the image by managing the world, right? Change the people, fix the conditions, discipline the environment. Then the reflection will please you. But that's not how the mirror works. You can't bend the reflection without bending yourself. You can't sculpt light from the surface of glass. The need for control always arises when trust collapses. Somewhere deep inside, a fracture appears, a doubt that the universe is coherent, that the field will hold you if you let go. In that doubt, the mind declares itself ruler. It begins to manipulate circumstances, convinced that peace will return once everything is perfectly aligned. Yet every act of control signals to the mirror, I don't trust the reflection, and the mirror, flawless in its obedience, reflects back experiences that justify more control. The tighter the grip, the more chaotic life becomes. You've probably felt it in moments of crisis, that silent panic when things refuse to match your plan, the phone call that changes your day, the unexpected rejection, the illness, the delay. Each disruption triggers the reflex to fix. The ego rushes in with strategies. Explain, argue, correct, dominate. But what if these events weren't interruptions at all? What if they were precise feedback from the mirror, showing you the vibration of resistance itself? Control is resistance disguised as order. It says, I know better than life. And yet life's intelligence extends far beyond personal comprehension. It arranges synchronicities, not spreadsheets. It operates through resonance, not force. When you manipulate appearances, you interfere with the deeper orchestration, the one that unfolds through coherence, not command. Observe your own behavior when you feel out of control. The body contracts, breathing shortens, the mind accelerates, seeking reference points. You become the conductor of a symphony you can't actually hear. In that tension, the mirror loses clarity. It starts to distort, reflecting back confusion and conflict. The harder you try to manage outcomes, the more the reflection trembles. You're no longer dancing with life, you're wrestling with your own projection. There's a paradox at the heart of this. Control promises stability, but breeds exhaustion. Freedom, on the other hand, feels terrifying at first because it asks you to trust an intelligence larger than your own. The mirror doesn't obey control. It obeys vibration. When you release control, you return to alignment, and alignment quietly reorganizes everything that control tried to force. Think of a river. If you try to redirect it with your hands, you stir turbulence. But if you move with its current, you discover it was already flowing toward coherence. The same is true of the events in your life. When you stop resisting the flow, when you stop dictating how the reflection should appear, the mirror settles. What was once distorted becomes clear again. To see this in real time, pay attention to small situations. An interrupted plan, a delayed response, a person who doesn't behave as you hoped. Watch what happens inside your chest when you lose control of the narrative. There's a contraction, a tightening, a flicker of defensiveness. That contraction is the signal, the exact vibration that the mirror is reflecting through external events. Each trigger isn't an obstacle to control, it's a call to surrender. Surrender doesn't mean apathy. It means allowing intelligence to move through you rather than from you. When you stop grasping, intuition reactivates. You start hearing subtle cues, timing aligns naturally, the right words find you. What once looked like chaos begins to reveal design. Control is noise, surrender is signal. The mirror responds to whichever one you embody. The mind resists this truth because it equates surrender with powerlessness. But surrender isn't collapse, it's coherence. It's the act of returning to the frequency where trust and action coexist. From that state you still act, but your actions are guided rather than driven. You still speak, but your words flow instead of forcing. You still decide, but without tension. Life begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like an unfolding pattern revealing itself in perfect timing. It takes courage to stop managing the reflection. Because when you do, everything you used to prop up artificially, your sense of control, superiority, predictability, starts to dissolve. What remains is uncertainty, and within that, pure potential. The mirror begins to show something new, not the projection of fear, but the quiet symmetry of trust, and as you relax into that symmetry, you start noticing something peculiar. The reflection moves before you move, as if anticipating your alignment. Events seem to respond in real time to subtle shifts in your mood, your posture, your tone. You realize that control was never about power. It was about separation. The need to dominate dissolves the instant you sense that the mirror isn't actually outside of you. And that question, the one you've avoided since the beginning, begins to whisper again, more insistently this time. If the mirror doesn't respond to control because it is you, then what happens when you stop trying to command it and start listening to what it's been saying all along? Here's where the ground quietly shifts beneath everything you thought you knew. You've spent your whole life believing the mirror was out there, that the world was reflecting you through people, events, coincidences, successes, and failures. But what if the mirror was never outside? What if it has always been within the very mechanism of your perception, the screen of consciousness itself? The moment this possibility lands, something inside trembles. Because if the mirror isn't outside, then reality isn't a stage filled with separate actors and props. It's an interior phenomenon, projected outward through the lens of awareness. The world you see isn't showing you life, it's showing you the architecture of your own seeing. Imagine, for a moment, that your consciousness is a lens of light. Everything you look at, and every person, object, emotion, appears not because it exists independently, but because your awareness illuminates it. The light doesn't just reveal the image, it creates the conditions for it to exist at all. When your inner state changes, the wavelength of that light changes too. And so the world rearranges itself to match the new illumination. This is why, when your inner tone shifts from fear to clarity, even familiar surroundings feel different. It's not that the world changed, it's that the source of projection did. For years you might have thought that reality was a kind of objective film, playing on a distant screen. But consciousness isn't the viewer sitting in the theater, it's the projector itself. The film strip you call life is being read through the vibration of your current state, the characters you meet, the conversations you have, the timing of chance encounters. All of it unfolds as if the world were rearranging its script to match your frequency, because it is. Once you see this, even briefly, the dynamic of control and resistance loses its foundation. You can't fight the reflection when you realize the reflection is arising from within your own awareness. You can't manipulate the mirror when you are the mirror. The struggle collapses not through philosophy, but through direct recognition. You can test this without any mysticism. Think of someone who irritates you, a person whose behavior feels unbearable. Now, rather than analyzing them, observe the subtle field of sensation that appears in your own body as you think of them. That contraction, that charge, that resistance, it's not caused by them, it is them within you. The mirror isn't showing a separate being, it's showing your internal relationship with that frequency of consciousness. What you perceive as them is a localized projection of energy inside your own perceptual field. This realization doesn't make the world disappear, it makes it intimate. The so-called outer begins to feel porous, responsive, alive, like a dream that knows it's being dreamed. Every sound, every gesture, every coincidence starts to pulse with a strange familiarity, as if everything were whispering in your own voice. That's because it is. The universe is a feedback system designed to return you to awareness of yourself. The ego resists this truth because it thrives on separation. It needs an outside to defend against, a problem to solve, an enemy to outthink. But when the walls between inner and outer dissolve, control becomes meaningless. You don't control your own reflection in a mirror, you simply align your expression. Likewise, when you understand that reality is your own projection, the only meaningful action is refinement of perception. You stop fixing the world and begin fine-tuning the lens through which the world appears. And this changes everything about how you move through life. Every encounter becomes communication with yourself. Every challenge becomes a mirror test, not of morality, but of resonance. If you meet anger and feel the impulse to defend, you're simply facing a frequency that lives in you, asking to be witnessed. If you meet love and openness, you're seeing the parts of yourself that are ready to be embodied more fully. Nothing is random. Nothing is external. The mirror of life is an intimate correspondence between consciousness and its contents. At first, this can feel overwhelming, even disorienting, because the implications are total. There's no longer a place to hide your contradictions or outsource responsibility. Every moment becomes a reflection of your state, every silence a teacher. But beneath that exposure lies something extraordinary: freedom. When the mirror isn't outside, you realize that no one and nothing has the power to determine your experience. You can't be a victim of your own reflection. You can only be unaware of it. Awareness restores agency. There's also tenderness in this discovery. You begin to see that all the faces you've loved and lost were facets of one consciousness, yours wearing different masks to show you different lessons. The people who hurt you, the ones who helped you, the random strangers who appeared at the right moment, each was a movement of the same mirror, speaking in different dialects of energy. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening as you. And the deeper you let that truth settle, the more the illusion of the other begins to fade. Compassion stops being a moral practice and becomes a natural consequence of seeing clearly. You can't hate a reflection once you realize it's made of your own light. Yet this understanding brings with it another challenge, one subtler and far more dangerous. When the mirror is recognized as internal, the temptation arises to use this insight to deny the darker reflections, to claim that pain, shadow, or anger are not real. But the mirror, even when internal, never lies. Whatever appears within it still belongs to you, still carries meaning. The next step isn't to transcend the shadow, but to meet it honestly, without denial or disguise. And that is where the next turning begins, the place where many spiritual seekers stumble, the hidden danger of spiritual self-denial, the subtle act of covering the mirror when its reflection feels too raw to face. Once you begin to realize that the mirror isn't outside, another impulse quietly creeps in, an almost invisible defense dressed in spiritual language. It whispers, "If everything I see is my reflection, then I should only reflect light. I should rise above anger, transcend sadness, reject fear." And so begins the most sophisticated form of self-deception, spiritual self-denial. The ego, unable to control the mirror anymore, learns to disguise itself as enlightenment. It starts subtly. You tell yourself you've forgiven someone, but the thought of their name still tightens your chest. You speak of peace while your body hums with quiet restlessness. You meditate to silence discomfort rather than to understand it. The face in the mirror looks serene, but the tension beneath the surface reveals another story. This is what happens when awareness becomes performance, when you polish the mirror but refuse to look at what it's showing. Spiritual self-denial is the shadow side of awakening. It appears as detachment, as calm, as wisdom, but it's often avoidance. It's the refusal to admit that within the light of consciousness, darkness still belongs. You convince yourself that certain emotions are low vibration, certain thoughts unworthy, certain memories unspiritual. You divide your inner world into acceptable and forbidden zones, creating the very separation you once sought to dissolve. The mirror, faithful as ever, responds with confusion and imbalance, reflecting a fragmented consciousness that preaches unity while practicing division. You can see this pattern in spiritual communities everywhere, people smiling through pain, reciting mantras while silently judging their own humanity. They trade authenticity for transcendence, thinking they've escaped the cycle of reflection. But the mirror doesn't fall for the costume. It waits patiently, holding the unacknowledged shadow in its surface until the seeker stops pretending. Every emotion you suppress becomes a smudge on the glass, clouding the clarity you claim to have found. Here's the paradox. The more you deny your shadow, the louder it speaks. It shows up as physical symptoms, relational friction, fatigue, and unexplained melancholy. Not because you're failing spiritually, but because wholeness demands inclusion, not exclusion. The mirror is ruthless in its honesty. It won't stop showing what you refuse to face. It will project your hidden fears through other people's behavior, your unowned rage through random circumstances, your denied sadness through moments of inexplicable emptiness. Life keeps reflecting the ignored until it's integrated. This is why genuine spirituality feels raw before it feels radiant. The first step isn't to transcend pain, it's to see it without judgment. True observation isn't selective. It doesn't turn away when the reflection becomes uncomfortable. When you say, "I am beyond anger," the mirror doesn't applaud. It simply keeps showing anger until you admit it's part of you. The reflection doesn't demand perfection, only presence. Think of it like restoration work on an ancient painting. You can't reveal the true colors by painting over the cracks. You have to remove the layers of dust patiently without damaging the original art beneath. The spiritual bypass is like using bright paint to hide the stains. It looks pure for a moment, but the authenticity of the image fades. The mirror principle works the same way. Covering what hurts doesn't transform it, it preserves it. So the question becomes, can you sit with your reflection when it's not flattering? Can you stay when it shows jealousy, rage, shame, or grief? Most people rush to fix these emotions, to replace them with light, but light without shadow is blindness. The goal isn't to erase darkness, but to bring awareness into it, to illuminate what has been exiled. When you can look into the mirror and see your shadow with the same tenderness you reserve for your light, integration begins. This is the point where spirituality turns from concept into embodiment. It stops being about escaping the human condition and starts being about inhabiting it fully, consciously. The divine doesn't reject your humanity, it expresses itself through it. The tears, the fear, the frustration, they are all movements of the same energy that gives birth to love and joy. When you understand that, even your imperfections become sacred. There's a quiet strength that emerges when you stop editing your inner world. You realize that acceptance isn't passive, it's transformative. The moment you stop resisting what you feel, the emotion loses its charge, the mirror clears. Reality no longer needs to shout through circumstances to make you notice. Life stops reflecting your denial because there's nothing left to hide. But the ego doesn't give up easily. It may twist this acceptance into a new identity. I am the one who embraces everything. Another mask, another layer. The mirror responds instantly, showing where sincerity ends and performance begins. The process keeps refining you, shaving off each illusion until only the unfiltered presence remains. The observer who no longer divides experience into good or bad, sacred or profane. And once that presence stabilizes, something subtle but profound starts to happen. You notice that reality begins to flow again, not because you've conquered your emotions, but because you've stopped lying to yourself. You've reclaimed every fragment of your being. The reflection softens, coherence returns, and the energy that was once trapped in repression begins to move freely. That movement, fluid, effortless, self-correcting, is the signal of integration. It's what prepares consciousness for its next realization. That real transformation doesn't come from rearranging the scene, but from shifting the center from which you observe it. Because when the observer changes, the entire mirror follows. Every seeker reaches a point where the same question begins to echo. How do I change my reality? After all the books, the meditations, the theories, there's still a longing to finally step out of the repeating scenes, to rewrite the script of one's life. The instinct is to adjust the circumstances, to alter the movie playing outside. But reality doesn't change by editing the scene. It changes by relocating the center from which the scene is perceived. This is the hidden key, the one that sits in plain sight, yet remains the most difficult to grasp. Because the human mind believes that transformation happens through rearrangement. If I get a new job, a new relationship, a new city, the reflection will improve. But that logic belongs to the old paradigm, the one that assumes the mirror is external. In truth, reality organizes itself around your center, the state of consciousness from which you observe. When that center shifts, the same scene tells a different story. Picture a kaleidoscope. Every twist rearranges the fragments into a new pattern, though the pieces themselves remain the same. You're not replacing the glass. You're rotating the center through which it's viewed. The same fragments, the same colors, but a new design appears, simply because the point of reference has changed. Consciousness works the same way. The people in your life, the circumstances, even the challenges may stay in place, but once your center moves, everything reflects differently. Most people attempt to change their reality through force or avoidance. They switch jobs to escape dissatisfaction, end relationships to avoid reflection, fill silence with activity to drown out their discomfort. But without a shift in consciousness, the new scene inevitably carries the old vibration. The details change, the pattern doesn't. That's why the same lesson shows up wearing new faces until you stop manipulating the outer picture and turn inward to adjust the lens itself. So what does it mean to change the center? It means relocating your sense of identity, moving it from the reactive mind into the witnessing awareness that precedes thought. The observer doesn't argue with the reflection, it simply sees. From that center, experience stops being personal. The mirror still reflects, but the one being reflected no longer believes the image defines them. Suddenly, what once felt like chaos becomes choreography. This shift isn't theoretical. You can feel it. Imagine you're in a heated argument. The mind floods with reactions, defense, justification, blame. But if, in the middle of that heat, you remember to step back and observe the energy rising within you instead of reacting to it, something remarkable happens. The intensity doesn't disappear, but it begins to move differently. The awareness behind the emotion, the center, remains untouched. You realize you can witness the storm without becoming it. That gap is the birthplace of transformation. Changing the center is less about doing and more about perceiving. You don't fix fear, you recognize the space in which fear appears. You don't erase pain, you notice the silent awareness that experiences pain without being consumed by it. Every time you shift from reaction to observation, you move the center. Each micro moment of awareness, the pause before speaking, the conscious breath before acting, repositions your entire reality. The paradox is that as soon as you stop trying to control the reflection begins to realign naturally. The mirror, now freed from the distortions of reaction and denial, starts to reorganize itself around your new coherence. Situations that once triggered you lose their charge. People you thought were adversaries soften or drift away. The same external world rearranges around an internal still point, like metal filings aligning themselves around a magnet. You can test this subtly in daily life. When something annoys or scares you, instead of trying to fix it, shift the center of perception. Ask quietly, from where am I observing this? Feel whether you're looking through fear, defense, or openness. Then move your attention back to the silent witness behind those layers, the space that notices but doesn't judge. The external event may remain unchanged, yet the entire texture of your experience transforms. The mirror's image becomes gentler because the observer's vibration has shifted. This is the essence of creation. You don't build new realities by manipulating forms. You let forms reorganize around new awareness. The shift happens at the level of being, not doing. When your center stabilizes in clarity, life's choreography follows effortlessly. What you once chased begins to approach you. What you once feared dissolves on contact. It's not magic, it's coherence. The universe mirrors the balance of the observer. When you are centered in wholeness, reality reflects wholeness. When you're fragmented, the world shows fragmentation. This is not a moral equation, but a vibrational one. The mirror can only reflect the tone of its light source, and something else begins to reveal itself through this shift. Observation itself is not passive, it's creative. The quality of your seeing shapes the scene. The moment you observe with clarity, you participate in reality's reorganization. The mirror doesn't obey imagination alone, it obeys awareness. Conscious seeing is the tuning fork that redefines the entire field. But the journey doesn't end there. Because once you realize that the center of observation changes everything, another truth starts to surface, one that transforms the whole premise of cause and effect. You begin to sense that the mirror doesn't just respond to the observer, it obeys the observer. Every glance, every focus, every moment of attention alters the pattern. The next question, then, is not what you observe, but how, because the power of observation itself holds the key to the mirror's response. There is a quiet law at the heart of reality, so subtle that most live their entire lives under its influence without ever noticing it. It is not mystical or metaphorical, though mystics have intuited it for millennia, and physicists now glimpse its edges through quantum experiments. The law is simple. What you observe strengthens. The mirror doesn't obey your thoughts, or your intentions, or even your imagination. It obeys the quality of your observation. Observation is not merely seeing, it is participation. The act of perceiving collapses potential into form. In the language of consciousness, attention is gravity. It pulls patterns from the field of possibility into tangible experience. Wherever your observation lingers, energy condenses. The mirror reflects not what you look at, but how you look. This is why two people can live through the same event and walk away with entirely different worlds. One sees rejection, the other sees redirection. One observes loss, the other perceives liberation. The external scene is identical, yet the inner lens determines its meaning, and meaning determines manifestation. The observer, not the circumstance, writes the narrative that reality obeys. Every moment of attention is creative authority. You felt it in small ways. When you fixate on a problem, the problem grows heavier. When you hold gratitude, coincidences multiply. It's not superstition, it's resonance. Observation is a tuning mechanism. The mirror of reality resonates with the frequency of the observer's awareness. When you observe with fear, you organize experience around threat. When you observe with curiosity, you open pathways for insight. The mistake is believing that observation is passive, but observation is influence. It is the bridge between consciousness and form. The mind assumes that power lies in doing, in fixing, arguing, adjusting. But the most powerful shift occurs in the stillness before the action, in the way you see what's happening. Your inner gaze is the instruction the mirror follows. Watch what happens when you observe something you've been resisting, a recurring problem, a difficult person, an unresolved emotion. The moment you stop trying to change it and simply look with clear, steady awareness, the energy begins to reorganize. You can feel it. The tightness softens, the static dissolves. Observation itself is resolution in slow motion. The mirror starts to shift because the observer has changed frequency from resistance to presence. Presence is the purest form of observation. It carries no judgment, no agenda. It sees without dividing, names without labeling. When you observe from presence, reality aligns around coherence. The mirror clears. What once looked chaotic begins to reveal hidden structure. The same events that once seemed random begin to carry intelligence, as if life were answering your gaze directly. There's a simple experiment you can make in your everyday experience. When you enter a space, a meeting, a store, a room full of strangers, pause before engaging. Observe without evaluation. Feel the subtle field of attention emanating from you, and notice how the atmosphere responds. People will often mirror your tone unconsciously. The mirror is immediate, because consciousness is immediate. You are never truly separate from what you observe. Modern science offers faint echoes of this principle. In quantum physics, particles behave differently when observed. The wave collapses into a measurable form only under observation. Consciousness itself appears to be the hidden variable that finalizes reality's equation. But you don't need a lab to verify it. Your daily life is the experiment. Every encounter, every emotion, every coincidence is data from the field of observation. The feedback is instantaneous. The true discipline, then, is not controlling what you see, but cultivating how you see. Observation colored by fear distorts the reflection. Observation grounded in presence restores balance. The world doesn't obey your effort, it obeys your coherence. When you look at life with clean awareness, the mirror aligns effortlessly, because it is designed to follow consciousness, not command. This is also why distraction is the silent thief of creation. Scattered attention fragments the mirror. When your focus is divided, reality mirrors division. Partial clarity, mixed results, half-finished manifestations. But when attention becomes unified, calm, sustained, anchored in the present, the reflection stabilizes. Life begins to move in rhythm with you, and yet observation is not a technique, it's a relationship. The mirror is not your servant, but your counterpart. You are in constant dialogue with existence, and your gaze is the language of that conversation. Every moment of awareness sends a message. I see this, therefore it matters. The universe responds, if it matters to you, I will make it real. So pay attention to what you grant the privilege of your observation. The stories you rehearse, the grievances you nurture, the fears you revisit, each becomes a command the mirror faithfully executes. Observation is the seed of continuation. To withdraw attention is to let patterns dissolve. To see clearly is to invite transformation. As this understanding deepens, your relationship with reality begins to change. You stop treating observation as reaction and begin to wield it as art. Your gaze becomes intentional, not controlling, but creative. You start to sense the elasticity of the world around you, how it bends and brightens in response to your awareness. And then, without trying, life starts mirroring your stillness instead of your struggle. At that point, creation no longer feels like effort, it feels like recognition. You're not manifesting new realities, you're allowing reality to reveal the version that matches your frequency. The mirror obeys the observer not because of power, but because of oneness. There is no distance between what sees and what is seen. And from that realization, a new vision of reality begins to unfold, one where life is no longer something happening to you, but something happening as you, through the clarity of the gaze that finally recognizes itself, reflected everywhere. Reality was never outside you. Every scene, every silence, every coincidence has been the mirror of your own state of being, showing, teaching, and shaping you into coherence. The mirror principle isn't mystical, it's precise. Life reflects not what you wish for, but what you are in this very moment. And that means the power has always been closer than your thoughts, resting quietly in your awareness. When you change the way you see, what you see changes. So take this moment as a living experiment. Observe your next thought, your next emotion, your next choice. Not to control it, but to truly see it. That single act of honest observation begins to rewrite the reflection. If you reach this point, write in the comments, I see the mirror. And if this message resonated with you, choose one of the videos now appearing on the screen. Continue the journey deeper into awareness and let the mirror keep unfolding.